Services Marketing, Part 5. Here are the learning outcomes for this section. We'll look into service failure and also look at the processes of service recovery. Before we do that, let's recap on Part 4. In Part 4, we looked at how service quality is conceptualized and measured. We regarded service quality as a complex construct and looked at it through the Parasureman et al. Model. We saw that quality perceptions are subjective for each customer within a service encounter, and we looked at how service quality is measured using the gaps between expectations and perceptions among customers. What we're really doing in this final section is we're thinking about what steps do we take from understanding service as a model, like we did in Part 4, breaking it down into different pieces, to actually understanding the delivery of service quality in context and how that relates to service experience. So we're going to see that in real life, things go wrong and problems need to be rectified. Hilton International is an example of this. Their internal focus is on excellent service, and they say delivering the brand experience is the principal marketing tool we have and is the beginning and end of what we do. And they designed a service blueprint which outlines what they call, quote, the ideal guest experience. And what do you think the department in charge of designing that service blueprint was? It was the marketing department. So that department has outlined the requirements for recruitment, training and development, and they monitor and evaluate service delivery levels throughout the organisation, and they will then address issues of service failure and design recovery processes, which is what we're going to look at in this section. This is an example of a service blueprint or a customer journey map for a pharmacist. Now, I'm not going to focus on it too much because we'll cover it in class, and we'll also cover customer journeys in the customer relationship marketing topic later on in the semester. But what you can see is that the timeline, the actions, the roles of different members of the performance of service are outlined, and they're trying to predict how people will react, what people will do, when they will do it, in order to manage the process and ensure or try to minimize the amount of failures that take place. Service inputs and outcomes. Now, using the gap model that we looked at in the last section, you arrive at 5 different dimensions of service quality as Parasureman and colleagues identified. So certain service inputs such as tangibles, responsiveness, i.e. how quick and efficient is something, courtesy, is it polite, friendly, considerate, sincere, communication, do people take time to listen and explain, and competence, knowledge or skills and training. These service inputs result in key service outputs which consumers use to evaluate a service encounter. So you have tangibles, which is the physical evidence, things like price, place and promotion from our marketing 4Ps marketing mix. Responsiveness, that relates to people and processes. Courtesy, that relates to people directly. Communication, which relates to promotion, people and processes. And competence, which relates to people and processes. So these are all combinations of the marketing mix elements which we know and understand. So once you've put in the service inputs, you achieve service outcomes. So we want services to be accessible, i.e. easy to use, where it's clear that our needs are understood and they're reliably catered for. So the expected standards are being met and they're credible in terms of being trustworthy, believable and secure. So going down this list of service outcomes, we see access, meaning the service is easy to use. Understanding the customer is to do with empathy and sincerity. Do we feel as though the way in which the service is being delivered is sincerely attending to the needs that the provider recognizes we have. Reliability, does it meet the standards and does it do so consistently? Credibility, do we trust the brand or the image, or if there are service guarantees, for example, are they followed through on? And security, we should feel as though there is a minimal risk, or risk is managed and taken care of, and that we are safe when we are in the environment. So when we put those together, we see service inputs on the left and the service outcomes on the right, and how those different parts might correspond to outcomes either on the positive side of those outcomes or the negative. But if we put back in the gaps that we considered in part 4, we had gap 1, which was service provider's misconception of the customer, gap 2, inadequate resources, gap 3, inadequate or inconsistent service delivery, gap 4, exaggerated promises, and gap 5, jumping to conclusions. We can see how those gaps relate to service inputs and service outcomes. Now if we return to that model, we remind ourselves that in the center of the model was the service experience. So that encounter that takes place that we understand to be the service experience results in really one of two overall outcomes. Either the customer is satisfied or dissatisfied. And given that we've already discussed how complex the whole process is, and that looking at the research, we can see that a disconfirmation paradigm is used to determine service quality, it's evident that the system is geared towards expecting some form of dissatisfaction on occasions. Therefore, those who are responsible for delivering services marketing need to see failure as part of the system that they manage, and they need to have effective strategies built in to design a mitigation process for occasions when failure does occur.